Alrighty, here we go. This is the progressive era, and these are your progressive era points. So let's talk about them. So when we talk about the progressive era, we have to go back to the Gilded Age. Now, again, with the Gilded Age, we had the robber barons and the captains of industry. So with these captains of industry and these robber barons, there's a lot that needs to be said about all of the different things that were happening. So a lot of people were kind of getting fed up with it. And so when they got fed up with it, they determined that there was going to be some major differences and issues that they wanted to have addressed, i.e., progress. One of the ones we've already talked about, and we talked about it yesterday, was women's suffrage. That's women's right to vote. Hint, hint on your test. Another thing they wanted to do was end child labor. They also wanted an 8-hour workday. And a lot of times people would be going to work for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, if not 7. Safer working conditions. There was a high probability that you could go to work and come home missing limbs and or not come home at all. So that was a big deal. Conservation of land. Again, we can't develop everything, otherwise we won't have anything pretty left over, or even like, say, a park. And then the last thing, which is another word like your great grandmother's name, temperance is the name of it, otherwise known as no alcohol. Again, there's a lot of people that were starting to drink, and they drank a lot simply because, again, it was such a horrible thing to work at. One of the favorites that people would do would go drink from the hose, which is basically leftover beer or swill or liquor all dumped in the hose. And you could do that for a nickel. And that was one of the best ways to get drunk really quickly. So, again, Americans, always innovative, came up with the beer bong, real old school. So legislation, okay, or laws, okay, that we came up with. The first thing was the Sherman Antitrust Act. And this Sherman Antitrust Act was really, really good because it prohibited monopolies, which was really important in the United States. And again, this is only in the US. We're going to talk about imperialism in a later chapter, and that does not apply outside of the US's borders. We also can talk about the 19th Amendment, which we passed, which again was women's right to vote. Okay. And then the 18th Amendment, which prohibited alcohol. And again, we have to remember alcohol's been part of the human condition for thousands and thousands of years. Many people use alcohol, they have no problem with it, but a lot of people were seeing massive alcoholism destroying families. There was the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the Anti Saloon League, all of these different things that were happening. Another one that happened that are still a little bit more important today are the Pure Food and Drug Act. What you buy was actually what you buy. There was, again, no snake oils or fake food. It was, if you said it was beef, and that had to be it. Another one, more importantly, was the Meat Inspection Act, which again made sure that your meat was 100% beef or kosher, and that again it was a it wasn't rotten or anything like that. And again, this was meant to, again, protect consumers of these products. Because again, this is very important so people don't get sick, they don't end up on any kind of major issue, possibly with like a listeria outbreak, if it's like ice cream, or an E. coli outbreak, if it's like lettuce or something else like that. Last but not least, we have three major things that happen. We have a recall, we have a referendum, and we have initiatives. Again, if at some point you guys want to propose something to a legislature or a lawmaker, you can do this. Again, a recall, you can ask to see votes cast. So again, we're not going to have any fake voting or anything like that. You can ask for a referendum in which, again, you can help to remove bad politicians. These still exist today. And then you can have things like initiatives where citizens directly propose laws for the ballot. So this is like things like stop signs on a bus that got started in Cleveland. It was massively important with Cleveland because, again, we don't want people getting hit when they get off the bus. And again, this is one of those things where it was proposed by a group of mothers. Other things like alcohol ages, tobacco ages have all been initiatives that have been proposed by other people. Again, so the progressive era is this era of people deciding that they want to try and legislate new laws to protect humans and citizens. So when we look at the children, right, one of the big things with children is that they, of course, yearn for the mines, as would be said at any other point. So it's massively important that we are looking at those things in terms of, how do we protect against child labor issues? How do we make sure that we're doing the things that we should do for future generations? Again, if all you're doing is focusing on, what your children can provide for you, you're not allowing them to grow properly. There's a lot of other issues. And some of you already have jobs, but again, hopefully it's not because you have to support your family, but maybe it is. So again, children were small. They could fit in tiny spaces like the mines. They could also fit um, where they could fit in like factories between the machines. And again, these jobs were simple, but had to be done. Okay. So why were children put to work? Well, there's a lot of big reasons with this. Okay. Number one, they had to support families if they were part of a family. Again, think about this. If you owned a farm, they'd all be pitching in to help on the farm. You move to the city, they all have to make a buck. If you've ever watched Newsies, some of the kids that are working actually have families. They try to support them. And again, it's a big thing where, again, kids are easier to manage. You're also cheaper because, again, what are you going to do? Say no? Can't really do that. And then also, there are tons of orphans because, again, city life is killing a lot of adults. There's a lot of accidents happening at work, so that's causing issues with all sorts of different people. So that's a major major problem. And again, if you've ever seen the show Newsies, again, Spider is turning in orphans to workhouses because he makes a tidy profit. And when they need more people, they just go find more orphans. Again, factories are very dangerous. They're very dark. Again, no guardrails, no safety machines. Again, if you died, you died. Um, Again, you're going to get maybe 1 day off and you're going to be working 12-hour shifts. Again, if you're working in like a clothing factory, you're going to be breathing in cotton fumes and stuff like that. You'll be lucky if you live past 20 because you'll get cotton lung. Cotton doesn't dissolve, it's a fiber. So again, if you eat cotton, you're fine because you just pass it through your GI tract. But if it goes in your lungs, you can get what's known as white lung. You've probably heard of black lung and coal dust. Like it just settles in your lungs, and again, it will kill you eventually. White lung was much the same. Basically, your lungs filled up with cotton, and then you couldn't breathe anymore, and so then you would pass away. Often you'd get maimed quite often in those machines, and then diseases were rampant in factories as well. So again, if we break this down, children back then are working long hours. Okay, they do not attend school, especially girls. That's a male thing, potentially. Again, very dangerous working conditions. Okay, and again, very low wages. Meanwhile, you guys now go to school. It's a requirement, it's a law. Okay. You might have a part time job. Okay. You might play sports. Okay. And again, you have hobbies or extracurriculars like sports and other things like that. Again, the biggest thing here that both of you are tending to be forced into, especially with just various things, is again, family and friend influence. Like when we're talking about specifically anything you can do, you look definitely at things with, parents want you to go to college or not go to college, friends are going to go do this job or that job, sign up to work with them. Always a big deal. So again, that's an important factor there. So again, it's one of those things where, children working, it's always been a bit of a dangerous thing, but also something that's been very, very prevalent. Again, find me a picture here, maybe of a small child working in the mines. Maybe not, I don't know. We'll see. Okay, so investigative journalism kind of got to start here in investigative journalism. What do I mean by that is muckrakers. They're journalists who are going to expose a lot of corruption. So, like, one of the big ones here is Ida Tarbell. And again, she writes history of Standard Oil. Again, remember J.D. Rockefeller, all of that kind of stuff. Basically, she exposes how bad J.D. Rockefeller is, all of his bad business practices. Okay. And again, she helps along with the Sherman Antitrust Act to break up that monopoly. Now it's pretty much back together, but hopefully the idea was that that was not going to happen. But she did a good job, and especially as a female, that was massively cool. So then Jacob Riis, he's more famous for photojournalism. He would take pictures. So think back to our baby in a basket over, uh, over the city. That was a big one. Um, Again, he would go take pictures in the slums of New York. Okay. And that was a big thing. And again, he would look at like tenements and immigrant housing. Okay, which is massively important. Again, he loves to be using flash photography, is one of the, again, fathers of modern photography. Okay, so that was a massively important thing there. And again, it's going to expose all of that to make sure that people understood, there are impoverished people, this is how they're living. Lincoln Steffens, he is from New York, and he specifically writes a book known as The Shame of Cities. And it is a bestseller because again, he exposes so many things in corruption, okay, and again, especially political reform by again exposing things like Tammany Hall, which was a place that rigged elections, and again, how all of this would basically feed back money to politicians and things of that nature, much like we kind of see today. Again, this is nothing new. History is just repeating itself. And then when we get back to Upton Sinclair, his famous thing was the novel The Jungle, which was about the Chicago meat packing. Chicago meat packing plant. Okay. And again, all of the conditions that had to go into that. Again, Chicago meatpacking was huge because it was just north of like Kansas City, so it was like the largest meatpacking place in the world. Um, Again, the biggest thing is again you would have people losing fingers and toes, toenails, hands, etc., and getting ground up into hot dogs. His biggest thing is that a lot of his stuff eventually helped to bring about the idea of the Pure Food and Drug Act. Okay. And that's massively important as well as the Meat Inspection Act. And again, he tried to run for office as the Socialist Party candidate. That never happened. And again, he also begins an idea of what's known as yellow journalism or fake news, as we might call it today, but the idea that there can be slanted heavily slanted news stories that may favor something over another thing. So that's a big part of that as well. All right. When we get to these labor union strikes, again, the biggest thing that really helped people to fight against their bosses and the companies were labor unions and strikes. So think of it this way. If you didn't like, what we were serving for lunch and you all stopped eating lunch, you would cost the school a lot of money to the point where they may have to listen to you. Again, strikes are basically the last resort of somebody who's trying to get change. And the idea is we're going to cost you so much money that you are going to have to listen to us. Otherwise, it's going to be really, really, really bad for you. So, when we look at some of these big, big strikes here, one of the biggest ones that's going to happen, okay, is the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. So again, that guy goes up here. Again, we'll get to the Haymaker Square riot here in a second, and also the Homestead Strike, which happens right here in 1890. Okay, so when we talk about the Haymaker Square riot, and when we talk about the Pullman car here in 95. Okay. Notice this is also a timeline, so I would know when these things happened. Okay. We run into a couple of things. So with the railroad things, what happens is, again, we have layoffs. So again, you're out of a job. We also have salary reductions. So again, even if you stay, you're losing money. And so you can't save or do anything like that, which is very, very problematic. Okay. Again, this leads to a lot of railway workers striking, which again causes a lot of issue. And then what ends up happening is you have state militia, like the National Guard, like right now, gets called out to quell the uprising and break the strike. This happens specifically in Pittsburgh, okay, which is very, very problematic. Again, what ends up happening is the striking workers, 20 of them are killed in a fight, and federal troops are called in to break the strike. Again, people are freaking out right now because there are federal troops in certain cities like Washington, D.C., National Guard troops, excuse me, and sometimes that does happen. None in recent memory, but again, here as we study history, we see that that's not completely out of the realm of possibility with all sorts of other things. What we see here is we see a riot that happens in Chicago in Haymarket Square. And what happens is we have 1,400 workers. Okay. And again, they have an organization known as the Knights of Labor, which is a union. It's a big union. Okay. And again, what they want to do is protest police on breaking strikes. Okay. And here's what happens 180 police arrive to break up the protest. Unfortunately, a bomb is thrown. 7 are killed, 60 wounded. So again, these protests are ending in massive violence, which is not good. Definitely not the way we want to see them go. And again, this is one of those things where it was very possible the federal government couldn't operate without these railroad cars, without these things. Modern day today would be like air traffic controllers. We cannot have planes without air traffic controllers. Same thing with like semi trucks. We cannot run a country without our semi truck drivers. So when we talk about the homestead strike, there are 5,000 steel workers. And with those 5,000 steel workers, what happens is they go on strike against U.S. Steel. And Andrew Carnegie, if you remember him, once again in Pittsburgh. Okay. Again, there's a battle that erupts between 300 Pinkertons. If you've ever played Red Dead Redemption, Pinkerton is a private police agency. They investigate stuff all the time. It was kind of like the FBI before the FBI. They're still around today. But Henry Clay Frick, the plant manager, hired them to break the strike, which again is not completely out of the realm of possibility. So when we look at, um, you know, what ends up happening again, 7 guards are killed. And again, 7,000 troops are sent in by the governor to end the strike. Okay. So again, this is one of those things where we're not fooling around like at all. And the problem you run into again is a lot of these people are trying to keep costs low, but also they're almost breaking the bank. And that's where we end right here with the Pullman strike. This guy right here, his name is Eugene Debs, and was pretty much a communist. He was a really, really far left socialist. The thing that he wanted to do in the Pullman Palace Car Co. So Pullman made lavish train cars. So think of it like a Rolls Royce or a Bugatti train car. Okay, like this sucker bougie. Okay, so the problem is they then cut hours, cut wages, but they kept rent up, which is not good. This is going to lead to people losing their homes, being out on the street. And again, Eugene says you need to unionize so that, again, you can fight this. Most people don't like that. And unfortunately, the thing that we should have protected them, the Sherman Antitrust Act, is used against them to break it up by President Cleveland. And again, some of these things are absolute necessities for our country to function. Pullman, not necessarily. But again, we see that a president is going to break that up. And not only does he use the Sherman Antitrust Act, he also uses 10,000 troops. So they were not fooling around when we were talking about this. Like, not at all. So when we get to the temperance movement, there's a lot of different reasons here. So some big reasons for the prohibition of alcohol. Again, most people can handle alcohol quite well. But in this particular case, we need to understand a couple of things. The average American at this time was consuming 3 times, okay, as much as the average American today. That is a lot of alcohol, okay? And again, you're running into a lot of issues, especially with like husbands doing most of this, and again, women and children have few, if any, rights. So that's a big reason. However, there were people that fought against prohibition, so in this box right here, okay? Again, how do you enforce it? That's a big question, okay? And again, if you're not able to enforce it, again, there's a number of people, like tons of US citizens drink, okay? And again, very few saw harm here. Especially if you're like Anheuser-Busch or Jim Beam or Jack Daniels or Johnny Walker, like a lot of these homegrown whiskeys or beers or anything like that, these are things that, again, employ people that will have to close if, again, we get rid of alcohol. Again, bars, if you open a bar or a saloon, or again, any kind of brewery or something like that, that's going to be massively problematic for you because again that's how you make your um, money. So when we take about these things, we have the Women's Christian Temperance Union. That's a big one. And then we also have the Anti Saloon League. And the arguments here were that again alcohol invites other bad behavior. Kind of like when I was in school, they were like, weed is a gateway drug. They thought alcohol would invite things like prostitution, and it would invite things like gambling and other things that were viewed as not very good. So what I want you to do is in this bottom right-hand corner, find me a political cartoon, okay, just like it says right here, and explain what it means. Explain to me its message and how all of that is supposed to be going, okay? So that's what I want you to do there. Alrighty, moving right along. So we have two really great ladies here. We talked about one yesterday with Susan B. Anthony, but we also have just the general women's suffrage movement. And again, they've been fighting for their right to, have the right to vote for a very, very long time. Again, the first time is the Seneca Falls Convention. Sorry, no, it's not the Seneca Falls Convention. The Seneca Falls Convention is before the Civil War, right around 1848. Again, the Civil War is going to halt that cause pretty steadily right there in 1860. to 1865. Again, Anthony and Stanton are going to organize National Women's Suffrage, or NASA, in 1878. Again, this is the first NASA, not the second. They have to do another one. So again, this is in 1878. Sorry, 1870. That needs to go up. Okay. Again, Susan B. Anthony is arrested for voting in 1875. This is the thing we read the other day. Again, she was a fiery lady. Both ladies went on hunger strikes. Both ladies did a lot of stuff like that. First women's suffrage is voted down in 1885. Unfortunately, Wyoming comes into the U.S. with the first women allowed to vote. That's 1890, sorry, which is important. Okay. So in 1890, Susan and them start another NASA, NASA 2, in 1905. Okay. Again, this is one of those things that we're going to try to do that. Jeannette Rankin becomes the first lady of Montana in 1905 to get elected to the Senate. She's also the only lady to vote against both world wars because she couldn't send anybody else's son to die. And then in 1920, women are given the right to vote, which is excellent and definitely something to be celebrated. Again, it is one of those things that it's a tough thing to realize how hard they fought for this. Again, African American males were actually given the right to vote over women. So many early things before, back after the Civil War. So in 1865 to 70. So again, Katie Stanton here was a radical supporter of women's rights. Again, she believed that women had the rights under the law of everyone else. Again, she organized and campaigned a ton. This is not something that was just a easy breezy kind of thing. She did a lot of it. And again, she was the first one right there to organize the Seneca Falls Convention, which was the first convention for women's rights. Okay, so that's a major factor there. We then also have Susan B. Anthony, who was on our silver dollar for a long time. Again, she is the one who, again, is going to go on a hunger strike. She'll chain herself to the White House lawn. Is arrested for voting in New York. Again, she wanted equal treatment, so she took it always on the chin and knew that she would get arrested. Both of these women, again, were huge, great visions of feminism and what it meant to be an equal citizen in the United States under the law and with voting. So a major win there. Last but not least, let's talk about great uncle Teddy Roosevelt. He famously was a big one on conservation. Now, again, this was still very much minded by him. He was a big hunter. A lot of the stuff that was in the Smithsonian at this time after he got out of office is something either shot, caught, trapped, caged on his year to year and a half long safari in Africa. Again, he was a huge believer in the conservation of our lands, but a big part of that too was he wanted to have someplace to go hunt or fish. So it wasn't necessarily something that he just wanted to do out of the goodness of his heart. But again, still worked out better for the American people. Again, his authority that he used with the United States Forestry Service. So if you ever thought about being a ranger, okay, he argued and established 150 national forests, 51 bird reserves, okay, 4 national game preserves, okay, 5 national parks, and 18 national monuments. And he did all of this under the American Antiquities Act. Okay. So here's what I'd like you to do. Google or look up national parks that you either have been to or would like to. Find pictures, put them here. Okay. And then when you get done with these particular things, label the parks on all of those different things. Curious to know where you've actually gone. And then answer Roosevelt's question down here in this box. Okay. So that's the Progressive Era notebook in a nutshell. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And if not, I'll see you in class. Thank you.